Inclusive teaching, supporting all students in the college classroom. Examining privileged identities, your role in the classroom.
I'll use myself as an example as a white male and an elderly white male who's kind of at the top of the tree of privilege. I really have everything going for me. It's very easy for me to commit all kinds of racial microaggressions in class with no awareness that this is going on. So, for example, the students that I call on to speak, even such a simple thing as who my eyes are drawn to in class. Are they drawn to people like me, to the male rather than female students? Are they drawn to the white students rather than students of color? When I'm thinking about policies for student work, is there at the back of my mind this idea that students of color can't be challenged quite as far? I shouldn't expect the same level of work from them as I do from white students. All these racial biases have been learned over a long time and are deeply internalized, and I'm never going to lose them. I know that. They're too deeply sedimented. But at least I can be a little bit more aware of them and keep them somewhat in control. So I think when you look at race and gender in particular, your own positionality is often unacknowledged, but makes an enormous difference in how you interact with students.
When I do training with faculty, in terms of preparing for difficult dialogues that they'll have in the classroom, challenges that they will encounter, I try to tell them that there is a difference between becoming non-racist and anti-racist, and that the two have to go together. Simply becoming anti-racist is not enough if you are not going to engage in anti-bias teaching and strategies to combat the biases that are going on here. And so what I tell them is that book learning is not enough. Yes, read the writings of Dr. Seuss on microaggressions and so forth, but that really isn't enough. Experiential reality, you have to put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable. And I oftentimes will ask white faculty, have you ever been in an environment in which you were the only white person in an all-Black or an all-Asian, all-Latinx group? How did you feel? And generally, they're very honest. Well, I felt uncomfortable. And I had strange things going through my mind. Will I be welcome? Do they think I'm an intruder? Do they notice that I'm not, that I'm not Black or not Asian? These are nested attitudes, beliefs, and feelings that need to come out that are not simply cognitive in issue, so that understanding themselves as racial cultural beings is a first step, I think, to being able to intervene. If they are not secure in understanding who they are as white people, that what white privilege is, how race, culture, ethnicity is a function of everything, and for you to say it's only a Black thing is to impose your whiteness upon other individuals. But I think I would come primarily to the issue, if you understand yourself as a racial cultural being, if you're comfortable in interacting with people who differ from you in terms of race, culture, ethnicity, then the strategies that are important come into play. And there are a lot of different strategies that I teach white instructors. One of them is simulation. One of the most difficult things for white professors to deal with is when a difficult dialogue on race occurs spontaneously. They're not prepared for it. And I say one of the ways that you can do is to prepare for it. Why don't you simulate something and into a role-play situation that is confined, that people can engage and pull lessons out of it, and you too will begin to understand what the lessons are that become very valuable here.
If a white instructor, and I'll use myself obviously as an example of that, is trying to become critically reflective about their own racial identity, I don't think that they can do that through an extended period of introspection. You can only really become aware of the meaning of your racial identity if you see yourself and what it is that you do and the way that you think through multiple lenses, particularly racially formed multiple lenses. There are a couple of ways that can happen. The first is through team teaching in a multiracial teaching team. And one of the things that I would stress for first year experience or freshman orientation courses trying to introduce students to learning about diversity, the way that they are helped to do that is to see a multiracial group of faculty trying to understand how each other sees the world, trying to empathize with the fact that the same event is responded to and experienced very, very differently depending on one's racial identity. And for a white faculty member like myself to publicly be seen to be open to having their own goodness and supposed morality being challenged. So I think that the team teaching, the team modeling of a racial discussion is really crucial as an initial activity before you ask students to do it. Then I think just in the normal process of collecting student data and student feedback, like for example, a critical incident questionnaire, which a student points out as the most puzzling action that they observed in class this week was something that I said or something that I did, or the most distanced moment that they experienced in class was when I introduced a particular reading or resource where their response to it was very, very different from mine. I'm assuming the reading is benign. They're experiencing this as highly abusive. You'll capture that kind of thing in the critical incident questionnaire feedback or any other anonymous feedback tool that you use. And by the way, the critical incident questionnaire is available for free download on my own personal website, stephenbrookfield.com. So it's my name, Stephen Brookfield, all one word, .com. And just click on the link to resources on my homepage, and that will take you directly. And then I do think that administrators have a strong responsibility here. It's not just a teaching activity. If I, as a teacher, am going to be willing to look at my own learned racism, become aware of the privilege that I have, try and leverage that privilege for the greater good, hopefully. If I'm going to do all those things, I need models of what that looks like. And I think reading literature, for example, of how faculty of color experience being in predominantly white institutions, what George Yancey calls the backlash of animosity and racial hatred that faculty of color often experience when they raise race as an issue. I mean, we as whites really need to be aware of a fundamentally different way of experiencing the world that we think is relatively benign and calm and cognitive. We need to understand by reading accounts authored by faculty of color just what a roiling, daily, abusive environment that often is. And I have read accounts particularly of Black female faculty where students de facto assume that they're the secretary in the department over and over and over again. So I think a line into the direct testimony of how faculty of color or students of color experience being on campus is a very good way of shaking you out of your own kind of benign complacency that you have.